Okay. All right. So welcome everybody. We're recording the session. So I will start and I will introduce our facilitators, and then I'll pass it over to the first facilitator. So I'll start by introducing Stephen. Stephen is an experienced educator and project manager. He's also a Chevening alumnus. He's an award-winning teacher and current project manager with a track record of getting results in the education and development space. He has a wide range of experience in the education sector, covering teaching, teacher training and coaching, curriculum development, qualitative research, impact and evaluation, fundraising, policy formulation and advocacy, design thinking, and project management. He designed and implemented several innovative solutions to challenges in rural education across 5 African countries, and he has led and contributed to over 20 projects at varying scales to maximize education outcomes for underserved pupils. He has a keen interest in projects and policies that maximize learning outcomes for young people in underserved populations, having collaborated and worked on such projects across countries in Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. So people who have attended Stephen's training have said many good things about the kind of workshops he has done. So you're in for a treat. And then I'll go on to introduce Kat. Kat has overall insights of EduSpots, EduSpots ongoing development as a voluntary CEO. She's currently chair of the UK trustee team and a director of the NGO board in Ghana. She's passionate about both the role communities can play in transforming educational opportunities and the importance of critically reflective, active citizenship education more widely. Her own understanding of education has been transformed through working with teachers and volunteers across the EduSpots network and beyond. In 2021, she was selected as a finalist for the Vaki Foundation $1 million Global Teacher Prize in partnership with UNESCO. She studied philosophy, followed by part two in management. She has a PGCE and an MA in international development and education. And she has taught for over 11 years, I believe. Yeah, so, and Kat has, let me say that Kat has reviewed thousands of CVs. So just stick and just hang in there and listen to some of the tips that she's going to share, very interesting ones about what to look out, what recruiters look out for when they are reviewing CVs. So I'm going to pass it over to Stephen, for Stephen to start.
Yeah, thank you very much for the smooth introduction. I will put my video up, hopefully to help with the internet bandwidth. But let me know if you're happy to be seeing my face, and I can put it on. I'll jump straight into the session. So let me share my screen. Initially wanted to do this without slides, but I thought people may get bored listening to my voice and not have something specific to be looking at. So I will be sharing my screen shortly. Can you kindly confirm if you can see my screen?
Confirmed.
Yeah, great. So we're looking at repositioning yourself for job opportunities, focused on CV writing. And the 2 objectives I have in mind for this section, which hopefully shouldn't take more than 30 minutes my end, is for us to acquire practical ideas for personal and professional development, but also to learn how to convincingly market our skills and experience to potential employers or partners. And so the first part of it is how you position yourself in the first place. And I think it's important to note here that your CV only communicates what you are made of. And so irrespective of how great you are at writing a CV, if you do not have the skills, the experiences, the achievements to talk about, your CV is still going to be empty. So learning how to write a CV is not enough. You need
Senyo, sorry to just jump in. Is it possible for you to speak a little louder or come a bit closer to the mic, as I think some people are struggling to fully hear everything you're saying?
Sure. I'll project my voice.
That's much better. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll project my voice a little louder. So the first thing is to position yourself. And I think that one thing that a lot of us lose sight of is our story, because we're going to walk through life, going through different experiences, and our story really defines us and make us stand out. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. We're going to cut to the chase, but I think it's important for all of us to think about the answer to this question: what is your personal story? Because that really sets you apart. That helps you define your values. That makes you determine what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And this is an intersection of your values, your big vision, the experiences you've gone through. These can be very deeply personal experience about your own family member, your own education, your own childhood experience. And these are powerful stories. It's important to also keep in mind that beyond the logic of writing a CV, stories sell and stories really move. So we need to reflect on how to communicate and draft your personal story. You should find some time to get this done. I'll jump straight to 5. Identify you with what you share. And so, for example, if you have your Twitter, your Instagram, your LinkedIn, your Facebook, and for example, every time you're sharing a funeral poster or a party poster, that is what people are going to know you for. But you want people to know you for what you do, what you believe in, your personal story. You need to find space to communicate that. And this links to the second point of establishing a strong online presence, especially on Twitter and LinkedIn. The most important point here, if you ask me, is to commit to learning. And this comes back to fully committing yourself to learning in all ways, because you would be able to fit in different environments and be locally relevant and globally competitive. You're committed to learning, and learning as in very personal learning, because you can have an MBA, you can have 2 master's degree, but at the end of the day, it's about how you demonstrate your knowledge and your skills. And this goes beyond just acquiring academic qualifications, but also learning and networking strategically. Trust me, if I am recruiting for a position and someone I know really well and trust tells me that, oh, I know this person who can do the job, I'm not going to question that. And so as much as you want to grow your expertise and skills and position yourself in learning all this, network strategically, because there are times that you need someone in that room to speak for you, to say, oh, I trust this person and they will deliver. And there's not wrong for people to recommend you for opportunities. Another important point is to join for that you get to network and meet people of similar minds and share opportunities as well. One quick practical step: pick your Twitter, pick your Instagram, pick your LinkedIn, or whatever social media platform you're on. Begin to scroll for 1 minute. If you scroll for 1 minute, check the post that you see. If there's nothing new, nothing you are learning, I feel like you are not in the right circle of people. If you scroll through and no one is saying anything relating to your field, related to the things you're passionate about, it means that carefully choosing your online network, so that, I mean, your time spent even on Facebook and LinkedIn is equally a learning opportunity, because you are hearing from industry experts. And for a long time, I've learned a lot just by following people on Twitter, because Twitter is just that space. You just type 1, 2, and these are people who have years of experience, rich. They share something small, and you learn a lot from that. Let's move on to writing a CV, and I'm going to just share general steps, and then we go more practical using a template, and then we dive into question and answers and end it there. Curriculum vitae is a Latin word, literally translated at the course of one's life. And the market and trajectory of recruitment has changed over the years, because your degree is an indication of the things that you can do. That is not the case any longer. And even if it is, when there's one job opening requiring someone who has a degree in communication, there are 100 people having a degree in communication that will apply for that job. And so it goes beyond just sharing what you have done to intentionally communicating value. And that means that look at how each sentence, each word on your CV communicates your value. What does it say about your values? What does it say about your skills? What does it say about what you believe in? You communicate problem solving, and it relates to a big point about showing rather than telling, which we'll come to when we share the sample. So one size does not fit all. Like, this is a popular practice because we all feel like we have the same qualification, the same work experience. So you have one CV. When you see a job opportunity, you throw it away. And trust me, this is the one big thing that a lot of people do, that they have a CV in hand, just looking for opportunities, and then they just fire through their CVs around, and then come back to say, I've applied to so many jobs and I'm not getting a response. And I feel that each CV should be written specifically for the job you're applying for. And it's more of, you go to a restaurant that says we offer this type of meal, and then you come and, okay, this is what we have. Then we present it. You have to present exactly what the person is looking for by going through your CV strategically, using the industry specific words which would come true, but take out things that you feel that not speak to what the person is looking for. And I feel like someone would look through your CV in 10, 15 seconds. They look at your education, they look at your work experience. If nothing on there tickles them, they lose it. And so people say 6 seconds, people say 15 seconds, like they just scroll your CV in a very short time. And if there's nothing there that catches their attention, you've lost it. And that is all. So one size does not fit all. And a lot of people erroneously think that, well, I've been a teacher for 20 years, or I've been a project manager for 10 years, and so I'm a good fit for this job. And so they think that the greatest value of their CV is that they've been in one job from 2009 to 2019. And the point here is someone can be on a job for just 1 year, but another person who has been on the job for 5 years or 6 years have less impact in the job than the person who has been there for 1 year. And so it's important to focus on your impact and not just the number of years of experience. And you don't go on your CV listing 10 work experiences, 10 different jobs without communicating the impact and the value of the contribution you make to those companies. And this is a general advice as well to all of us who are working, that, I mean, you have a job and that is great if you do, but having a job is not about just doing the routines and going to work and checking the boxes and getting your salary at the end of the day. Make sure you are doing something different, you're innovating something, you're creating, so you're adding value, you're going beyond the remit of your role, so that when you come to your CV, you don't struggle to communicate that value, because it is something that you have done, you confidently communicate it. And lots of people, especially, sorry, if there are some government workers here, but from the trend, there's quite a good number of people who are in government offices follow the routine and the mundane things. There's little room for innovation. Apologies again that I'm picking on some people, but it's not just about existing, but adding value that you can communicate on your CV. Another important thing here is narrative. Connect back to your personal story. Think about your values. Use SPAR. Some people use STAR, some people use SPAR, but PAR or ST. PAR is the problem, the action, the results. And so one big mistake you should avoid on your CV is, oh, I was responsible for doing this, and that. You should communicate this in terms of, this is the problem or this is the challenge, this is the action I took, and this is the result. Sometimes you go out to say, this is why I took that action, to really connect it to what you believe in. And so sell these stories and narratives to let people understand, why does it matter to you, for example, when there are children in your school who cannot go to school. And it's also important for you to go beyond the words to help the reader understand what drives you. So for example, someone said, I organize a back to school seminar, and ends it there. What is a back to school seminar? Why does it matter? And so you can reframe this to say, noticing a high dropout rate among young people in our community, I organized it. That communicate that you identified the problem, then you created a solution to that problem. And so it speaks to your problem solving ability, just not what you did, but why you did it, but also the results you got from this. And this is more of a, I don't know if I should call it an African or Ghanaian thing. We are afraid to sell ourselves and talk about the things we've done, because we want to be very, and as in we want to be humble. And I think your CV is your personal marketing tool. Nobody's going to sell you better than your own self. And so don't entertain any imposter syndrome or feel that you're being arrogant when you're communicating the things you did, as long as you did it. The last point, and then we jump to the template, is a lot of organizations use what we call the applicant track system, and there's not a lot of room to delve into that. But what it does is it's the organization or the recruiter feeds the software with keywords that they are looking for. And so they want someone who has a degree in this particular field. They want someone who has worked with this particular software. They want someone who shows problem-solving skills. And sometimes it is specific to your industry. And so it's important to use industry-specific words. So for example, you're applying to a role in EduSpot, you know that EduSpot is all about community-led education. If you have done something relating to that, go back to EduSpot and give EduSpot's own words back to EduSpot. And when the recruiter sees community-led, they can quickly connect to what you are saying. So you put on your industry glasses, look at what is the company's mission, what is their vision, what is in their report, read their report, what languages can you use, what specific skills are they looking for, and communicate that in your CV if you have that. So I'll end this section here, and then the next thing would be to go through just the education and then the work experience part of your CV. We don't have time to go through the whole CV. Those are the two most important things in your CV, and then we dive into question and answers. Like I said, this shouldn't take more than 30 minutes, so we have a lot of answers. So I'm going to close this slide and then show a Word document, which I shared during trainings as a template. All right, can you confirm that you can see the screen?
Yeah, it's all good.
All right, sure. So like I said, I'll only go through the education and work experience part using one example, and then we'll close it, and then, yeah, go into question and answers. But this is a bigger document, as I see, the one-page CV template, giving guidelines and comments on what to do. So for education, I mean, some people put education first, some people put it after work experience. And the general guidance I give is that look at what part of your CV is the strongest, and make sure that the first half page of your CV has your strongest point, because that is the opportunity to hook the person up. So if you think that it is your work experience that positions you best for this role, you can put it first. If you think that it's your education that sells you fast, you can put it further. The goal here is make sure the first half page of your CV captures the person, because if it doesn't capture them after reading, you've lost them, and they may not be interested and enthused about scrolling to find every single thing you can. So let's come to education, background, education, whatever word you use, you want to, academic qualification. The first thing is, I mentioned the qualification and program. So you could say something like BSc Agricultural Studies, the year that you started, and then the year that you completed. Now, some people, instead of maybe a completing degree in 3 years or 4 years, would have to maybe do it for 6 years or 7 years. If you think that there are specific circumstances that made the duration of your program irregular or problematic, you can mention the date you got the award finally. So they received on our awarded in this month, and that leaves out the question of why did you spend 6 years on your degree, unless that is an opportunity to communicate something interesting to the employer. You shouldn't leave room for that question. So the name of the institution and the location of that institution. A lot of people, majority of CVs I've seen just mention the qualification and program of it and then the name. And I think that one opportunity you have here is to look at specific courses under that program that matches any of the job description. So they are saying that we're looking for someone who has strong quantitative skills and can use blah, blah. So here you say, I took a course in quantitative analysis. So you are using the relevant course opportunity to match with what you studied in school and then what they are looking for. So the person reads and is convinced that, oh, you actually took a course on what I'm looking for. So that is another opportunity to stand out. From there, if you did the project work in your program, it's an opportunity to show your interest, your passion, and your experience. So you can mention the title of your project work. And like I said in the blue, this is, especially if it is related to what the organization does, someone recruiting for EduSpots will be very interested in someone who has done a project work on community-led innovations in education or something like that. So if your project work is of interest, you can mention it there, or if the organization is looking for research skills because your project work is your research work. As well as this, you may indicate, I've mentioned in the comment section here, you may indicate if you had a first class or 3 points. So that is not needed or necessary unless you think that it will speak for you. So you had a high CGPA, you want to communicate that, you put it there. Or they are looking for a cutoff point and they are saying it should be first class and upper. Now, imagine you have sent out a CV to a job that is looking for only first-class student, but on your CV, there's nothing there that shows that you are a first-class student. Unless the job asks for your degree to confirm, the 8 years may not pick you up, because once it is a key requirement, it is going to be part of the assessment criteria. And so if nothing on your CV shows that you had a second class upper or a first class, when it is a requirement, you are missing out on that. So this is an opportunity to include your grade if the job description asks for it. There's also an opportunity to talk about any academic awards you have received or scholarships you won for that program of study. Lots of people these days take short training programs, certification and other things. If this is not a formal qualification by a recognized body or a university, you may decide to put it under a different subheading. But the key point is, if you are including other things you have done, there is no point in listing 10 online courses you have done when it has nothing to do with the job you are applying for. And so if you ever want to put training programs, certified online courses you have attended, it's important that you specifically streamline this to the particular ones that are directly related to the program. Otherwise, it is occupying space. And I've mentioned in the PowerPoint that the number of things you have done or the number of courses does not matter if it does not communicate your value to the person recruiting. So if you're listing something like that, the course title is important for the training program, the name of the institution, and then the location, then description of skills you acquired as relevant to the position you're applying for. So this is a chance to flesh out that training. So acquired this training in doing this, and wrote a proposal on this. So that puts you ahead of someone who just said training in this and ends it there. Focus on the skills, focus on the value that you gain from that. So that is it with your education background. The next thing is work experience. The job title, the organization you work for, the location, the country, if this is a local or national job, just the town where you work is important. If it's an international role, you may include the country you work in. And this is particularly an advantage when you have worked in different countries. You communicate that to show that you are international, you have international experience by indicating, oh, you've worked in Ghana, you've worked in Togo, you've worked in Nigeria, you've worked in South Africa there. This may not make a big point if all your work experience is in Ghana and you're also applying to a company in Ghana, unless it's important. Now, this is very, very important because people read this a lot. You have bullet points under your work experience. A lot of people just copy or paste or just write responsibilities. I was responsible for managing this, writing letters, and that doesn't communicate anything. It's important to communicate here not your responsibilities, but your achievement. It's not about what were you hired to do. It's about what did you do and how did you do it and what was the result of the work. I've given a typical example here. It says insert quantified achievement describing the impact of your work. So for example, instead of introduce a marketing strategy project to increase company sales. Now this shows that of course you did something, you increase the company sales, but compare it to another example of someone who says initiated a data-driven marketing strategy and led a team of 6 to execute it with 20% less budget. This led to a record 400 new clients nationwide. You realize that this line communicates the problem, it communicates the action, it communicates the results, and it has keywords that kind of paint the picture of who you are. You are someone who executes, you are someone who leads, you are someone who innovates. This is a new record. You have done some work that has nationwide impact, initiated data-driven marketing strategy. So look for how to communicate your impact in a convincing way. But a strategy to use here is go back to the job description that you have seen, then underline the job description, the key things they are looking for. And then when you come here, make sure that your bullet point speaks to those job descriptions, because you want to convince the person that you are looking for this and I have done this here, so I'm the right person for this role. So the general idea here is to choose your words carefully. The comment here says you may insert a 1 or 2 line strong description of the company to give an idea of the work. To give an idea of the work, if the company name does not clearly capture this, I need to edit that. So this is, you have worked in an organization called Tell the Future. I mean, people probably do not know what Tell the Future is, but if it's Ghana Education Service, everyone in Ghana knows what Ghana Education Service does. You have an opportunity to use a short line to say, oh, Tell the Future is a global marketing company that operates in 3 countries and work in this. So the advantage of this is if you have been able to draw a line between the organization you have worked with and the organization you're applying for, you are convincing the recruiter that you have done something similar. And like I said, this is equally very important when people do not know the organization. A startup is new, people do not know it. So you draw that connection, but also an opportunity to flesh out the expertise or the area of the organization. So that is it with education and work experience. Like I said, time will not allow us to go through everything now in this year. And then we delve into questions and answers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. So guys, we're going to take questions and answers in this session. So please, if you have any questions, we will take your questions either in the comments or when you raise your hand. So we'll go over, Stephen, can we move to Kat now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yes.
Okay, so we'll go over to Kat. Kat has lots of tips that she will share with us before we now take the questions and answers.
Great. Can you hear me? Is my internet doing well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. So yeah, I thought just to give a bit of context, I wouldn't say, I think like many things in EduSpots, when you're a founding CEO, you have to pick up lots of experience and understanding as you go. And I think it's interesting even to reflect how much I've learned about recruitment since first starting. Imagine how difficult it is when you don't understand the culture necessarily you're recruiting in, you don't know the kind of processes, you don't know how other organizations are recruiting. You have to think about, you know, all these kind of things, different I guess cultural processes that already exist about recruitment, you know, stereotypes that might need to challenge in different ways, or assumptions people have about what you might be looking for that might not be true for your organization. And so I thought I'd just start by saying that even for recruiters, I think it's a big learning process. And sort of behind all of this, I think it's very important that you remember that the key goal that a recruiter wants is to find somebody who is a really good match for their organization. So I often feel like the recruitment process is a two-way thing. It should be set up so that organizations give potential employees the chance to understand and learn more about the organization as much as it is for you to for them to get to know you and work out if you're the right person. So recruitment is very important for organizations because they're investing a huge part of their income in their staff. And if the staff member isn't quite right, if they're not quite aligned with the culture, if their skills aren't quite the right fit for the role, it can be hugely costly in terms of time or energy for both the recruiter and for the individual. So it's something that is really, really important to organizations, and something that EduSpots in particular is trying to really improve as we go. And I think it's important to say that we're always coming at this with a learning mindset. But I think it's also important for you to, first of all, think about your organization you're applying to and understand their context. So for an organization, so I'm going to speak more from the EduSpots context, and I understand that's a very particular context. We are, despite what we look like, we're a very small staff team. I handle all the recruitment myself, and increasingly bringing in staff members, but still at the moment, I'm the one that reviews the CVs directly. And that's because I think it's such an important thing. And I think it's important to say that in a small organization, I've actually had a full-time job for the last few years, I only just left that. So I've been doing something else. So when you're when you're applying for a job, it's important, as exactly as Stephen said. And I think everything I'm going to say follows on from what he has so beautifully put together for us. You have to realize that a lot of organizations don't have that much time to review your application, but that doesn't mean that they don't really care about your application. It's just about the amount of time they can contribute. But that might be very different in EduSpots compared to maybe a bigger organization where maybe they have a whole HR recruitment department set up. As Stephen said, maybe some of them have software where they have to process, they have so many applications, they have to look for keywords, where in EduSpots, we really do look at every single application. We read every single CV, every single cover letter that comes through. But we're not able to have the amount of time where we can be giving lots of personalized feedback, which is something I would love to do if I had more time. So that's one of the reasons for having a motivation to lead this session, because sometimes I feel so awful, in fact, that some people are sending in CVs and cover letters that I don't think fully represents them, but we just don't have the staff capacity in EduSpots to give feedback and tell people how to improve in different ways for what we're looking for. So yeah, that just sort of sets the ground. So in terms of EduSpots for each of our roles, as I think this probably maybe helps you have a sense of what, because you might wonder, like, how many people are applying for the role? Maybe you feel you keep sending your CV off, your cover letter off. I remember doing this after university before I went into teaching, and I was sending my cover and CV off everywhere, and I thought it was great, but I wasn't getting even that many responses. So I think it's important that you try to find in different ways to have an awareness of how many people are applying for the roles you're applying for. So for EduSpots, when we pay to put our jobs on a job website, we get over 100 applications per role, which, as you can imagine, is quite a high volume of applications to look through, especially if you're very busy looking at different things. So I would say, although we read every single CV and every cover letter, it's skim reading. It's not reading through every single word. So I think you really need to have that in your mind. And I think Stephen's already highlighted this, to think about what are you going to do to make sure that you give yourself your best shot in getting noticed. And of course, some of this, you know, maybe you won't get noticed. I would hope in EduSpots, if you're right for the role, we really do think we will spot you. And so I'm going to explain a few things about, what I think might help you get spotted, not just by EduSpots, but by an organization that really is the right fit for you as an individual. So I've done a short PowerPoint. I've put this together a little quickly, but I thought these were the main things that came to my mind that I've learned sort of in the process of the last few years. And this is very much, once again, emphasize that this is my perspective, and I understand that I'm a kind of international recruiter. EduSpots is a kind of international charity. And it might be that a Ghana organization it definitely would be a Ghana big organization doing marketing will have a very different set of things that they're looking for necessarily from EduSpots. But I think some of these are quite general principles, and I'm happy to answer any questions or be challenged or similar. So just type into the chat any question that comes up. So firstly, I would say keep it short. 2 pages for a CV is enough. You don't need any more. That should be enough to sell yourself in a short space of time. Sometimes I get like 8-page CVs plus 20 certificates plus references and all of this. You don't need any of that. We're looking for a concise CV, 2 pages, and a cover letter that would be 1 page, 2-page max. And I assure you, you don't need anything more than that. And adding anything extra, it won't push us over the margin to see you. In fact, and I'm just going to give lots of honest reflections here. If you send me a 6-page CV, I'm going to think that you're actually not very good at being concise. And that if I set you a task in the workplace, you're going to send me something that's 3 times the length of what's needed. So it's important to say that how you approach the recruitment process is a reflection of your skills in the workplace. And that's why all of this is so important. And if no one ever tells you this stuff, I don't know how you would learn. So I wish someone had told me all of this myself a little earlier. So the second thing, following up, I think, from Stephen's focus on these 2 areas, is to really make your education background, your degree, and just to say as well that we wouldn't necessarily expect you to have a master's degree or even an undergraduate degree. In EduSpots, if you've done something incredible in your employment that shows a real impact, I don't think we're particularly looking for degrees, which might be different if it's an education role. But if we've got a communications role, we're actually looking for your experience and your impact. And I know that you might be surprised by that. You might think in EduSpots, you couldn't get a head of education role without having a master's or scholarship abroad or so forth. But honestly, I think maybe for a head of education role, we'd be looking for an undergraduate degree in a relevant subject, maybe. But the most important thing is actually your work experience in different ways. But my point here is make your education very easy to see. Sometimes I'm searching everywhere on a CV and I'm like, wait, have they been to university? Have they not? What did they study at school? What are their main educational interests? Have they done any extra courses? And if I can't find it, EduSpots is an education organization, so it would be a little bit worrying if you didn't think your education was very important. So make sure your education and your experience is very clear. So I suggest like having clear headings that says education and putting it in bold or in color or something where it stands out, and experience where it really stands out, as those are the two key things we're looking for. And sometimes when people do CVs and it starts with a photo and date of birth and your hobbies, sometimes that can distract from the actual key things we're looking for, which is your education and your work experience. The third thing is tailoring your CV to the particular role you're applying for. And this is something I think I hadn't really thought about that much myself before. But imagine you've been in education maybe, but then you decide you want to have a career sort of pivot into maybe communications. There's so much about being a teacher in different ways that will make you a good communicator, but you need to frame your CV to show your prospective employer that you're aware of that, and that you know that you maybe don't have any direct experience as a communications manager, but you need to show on your CV that you have the transferable skills. So to give an example, we had a job that we put up as head of fundraising in Ghana, as we're very keen to make sure that fundraising isn't just done in the UK or elsewhere. But the applications I received, and these were many of them, most of the applications didn't have any fundraising experience, which I would understand in a way, but they didn't either highlight if they had relevant experience in finance or the transferable skills. Maybe they're very good at persuading people. Maybe they're very good marketeers. Maybe they've got communication skills, but they didn't necessarily show those skills either in their work experience. So we sometimes, this might surprise you, but we get a lot of applications for a role like fundraising that will just come from teachers or from people who've worked in a bank, where they just list the roles they've had. And sometimes I just look and I say, but why are they applying for a fundraising role? So it might be clear to you why you're applying, but we're not gonna guess why you've applied, and we'll just assume you're just sending off your CV everywhere. And I think it's very important to say that just sending off your CV to loads of places with a standard cover letter, I don't think is easily going to get you the job that you're looking for, because it doesn't show that you are really interested in that organization. And we probably maybe 50% of the applications we receive is just a standard CV and a standard cover letter, with them not even mentioning EduSpots. It just says, "Dear hiring manager," and then a pre-created cover letter. And those ones I look through very quickly, and then they don't pass through unless they have a very strong area of experience in a relevant area or for a well-known organization. So yeah, this is really important. I think it's one of the key things to communicate. Okay, number 4 is explaining your personal impact rather than purely listing roles. I think Stephen's already talked about this, but just listing the roles you had, saying I've been a teacher here for this number of years, I've been in this organization, I've been a head of marketing, my role was to do X, Y, and Z. Again, it doesn't reflect the critical thinking and analysis skills that we would be looking for in the roles with EduSpots. So again, remember that if you're someone who's just listing everything, I would then worry if you're in EduSpots in a job that we give you a task and you're someone maybe that describes and lists rather than thinks analytically. But if in your CV you're saying, I was head of communications and the users on our Twitter increased by 50%. We had, like an extra 1,000 more views on our posts over this period, and we had positive feedback on our branding. that shows me that your mind is thinking analytically, that you're thinking about impact and you understand your role in change, which is different from just listing where you've been and what you've done. And I definitely support Stephen's comment about don't assume that because you've been a teacher for 20 years, that would make you necessarily a more attractive candidate for an organization like EduSpots than if you've taught for 3 years. You need to show how you've gone above and beyond in different ways. This might be very different, by the way. I know in Ghana, if you're applying to be a head teacher, there might be a set number of years you need to have done in a school, and this might be completely different. And this is where I'm speaking from EduSpots' perspective. Number 5, so I realize I'm talking more than I thought. This is quite a topic I have a lot to say on. Number 5, show how you've gone above and beyond in different roles. So don't just say, what you've done. Really don't be afraid, as Stephen said, to big yourself up. Show how you have done more than just your role description. As any organization will want someone who gives 100%, not kind of just, does their role and goes home. You want to see that extra mile reflected in the CV. Demonstrate, number 6, your ability to engage in your own professional learning. So, of course, an employer is going to love someone who recognizes their own skill gaps and then goes and does their own courses in their spare time to improve their knowledge. So that really shows you're independent. And that means that we as an employer wouldn't have to constantly advise you to do X, Y, or Z to improve your skills, but that you're onto it, that you're proactive. And that is always just brilliant to see. For those of you who are joining us from the EduSpots network, I'm always amazed by how many of you apply for EduSpots jobs, but don't mention the impact you've had as a volunteer. So I also hope if you're applying for other organizations, it's amazing to say that you've been a volunteer, that you've given this number of hours a week to your community, and that this is the impact you've seen, that you've maybe won a Volunteer of the Month award, or you've contributed to your spot developing its programs in different ways. So don't forget to put your volunteer work in alongside your experience. And the last point on this slide is just keeping it simple. So keeping things concise, thinking what key details do they really need to see? Because again, if you're skimming through, you want to really make sure that they have the chance to pick up on the most important things. So that might be, I don't know, that you scored really highly on one element of your degree that might make you stand out. It might be that you've, been selected for a fellowship. It might be that you're really proud of your success rate in a particular marketing strategy you led. It might be your exam results in a school. But think about what evidence you're presenting that is going to be the most attractive thing to your employer in different ways. I'm just checking time as I'm aware. Yeah, questions. I need to leave time for questions. I'm also just being the host and letting someone else in. So a quick note, I know we don't have time to go over a lot about cover letters, but I thought I'd put this in because I actually think when I look through applications, the cover letter is equally important as an indicator of the type of person we want in EduSpots as a CV. Often CVs feel a bit pre-prepared. We can quickly glance at them, see your experience in education, but a cover letter really lets us see how you understand our organization and how you're a fit for the particular role. So I'll run through these quite quickly, but these are some quick cover letter tips. So yeah, but again, you must make it specific to the organization. Sending, just standard cover letters, unless you're an incredible candidate with, a really amazing set of experience, amazing degree, and other things on your CV. It is very rare that we would interview someone who doesn't have a cover letter that's specific to the organization, because it just shows you're not that interested. And that's, I think, the key thing. You don't want to, if someone isn't going to be bothered enough to write a specific cover letter, it reflects they're probably not going to give as much effort in the role when they're asked to do different things. Maybe that might be an unfair assumption, but when you're a recruiter going through lots of things, you think that might be the case. You don't necessarily need to start with this, but you definitely need to explain what attracted you to the particular organization. So do read their website, do make sure you understand their work. Again, we receive so many applications where people really do not understand our work. And that can be a bit frustrating again, because it shows they haven't inputted into the research needed before the role. Explain the experience you have that fits with the specific role. So if I were applying for a job, I would really look through the full role description And in the cover letter, I would show how I have all the experience and role specification that they require. And if there's anything that I was missing, I would actually be open and say, I actually don't maybe have experience in managing teams, but I have mentored people, and I think I have the skills to manage people effectively, and I'm keen to learn. So that you're really showing that you've engaged with what the job involves, rather than just firing something off quickly. Yeah, as Stephen said, make sure that you show your passion and your interest through identifying key values of ways of working that the organization might have. So as Stephen said, EduSpots is all about things being community-led. So if you drop the words in that you're interested in community-led development, that will always make us feel happy and feel that you might be aligned. It's actually not that difficult to make someone think that you like their organization. It's just about finding their key buzzwords and filtering them in a not too obvious way through your application. And finally, yeah, I think cover letters should generally be quite detailed. You know, you should have thought them through. They should be filled with examples of your practice and things that you like about their work. Sometimes I just receive a paragraph, which again, this is very honest reflections. It just makes me feel, are they that interested? They've done this very quickly and similar. So really do put your time into a cover letter. And I personally think that putting your time into a proper cover letter and a proper CV for one organization is probably worth at least 10 randomly fired off CVs and cover letters that are non-specific, because these are the ones that really stand out. And I would say that even if the CV doesn't meet all the things that we're looking for, if I see a really amazing cover letter where there's fire and passion for EduSpots, where there's the skills for the role and there's an interest in learning, we would likely put the person forward for a task, even if their CV doesn't have that much experience. And actually there are people who've had jobs with EduSpots who maybe have much less experience than others, but wrote a brilliant cover letter and then came through an interview and showed us that they could really do the role. Just checking the comments. So Eric, nice to hear from you. So does the CV necessarily matter, considering the fact that someone might be very good but lack the skill to put up an excellent tailored CV? A good question. I think the CV is important as a kind of, you know, as Stephen said, this is who I am. This is my story. This is the skills and education I've had. And I would suggest that if you haven't put together a CV yet, that you do give it a go. There's loads of things online that will support you in writing a good CV. There's loads of just templates you can follow. And I suggest getting someone to look at it, because once you have a CV, I think maybe if you are sending off a lot of applications, I would probably spend the time in tailoring the cover letter and keeping a consistent CV, rather than spending loads of time rejigging your CV all the time, unless it's for a job you really want, because you'll be able to show in the cover letter how you've thought about how your CV matches to the role. So I would say a CV is very important, but I think the cover letter is your chance to really show your fit with the organization and the role. So I just thought I'd share a few things before we move to any final questions. So Emmanuel, how many pages should a good cover letter have? I think you can write a very good cover letter in 1 page, but making sure, you know, your paragraphs are properly developed, that they're well written with the grammar checked, although maybe grammar is more important in some roles than others, but making sure you're giving evidence and examples for what you say, and making sure you've researched the organization. I think, usually 1 page is fine, sometimes 2 pages. Yeah, you don't need to write a whole essay. Like 1 page should be enough if you really focus it well in different ways. So I've shared what we look for in EduSpots, not because, well, maybe some of you might want to apply for our jobs, but also because I think it maybe gives just a real honest insight of the kind of way of thinking that an employer might have. So in EduSpots, one thing we've realized, and I think a lot of organizations now realize this, is that the values and shared values is actually the most important thing. That I'd rather work with someone who has the same values as us than someone who has maybe great skills and experience, but is going to not be a good fit with the team for different reasons. So for example, in EduSpots, our core values are about teamwork. Like we really work as a group rather than it being about being standout individuals in different ways. That we want people to bring positive energy to the whole team rather than kind of being a bit flat. We need people who give as much as they take within the team. And we want people who really have that passion for educational equity. So in terms of your application, the kind of ways you would frame this would be by even how you talk about development practice. So EduSpots is all about sustainable and community-led change. So we're less about kind of short-term fundraisers. We're really about supporting communities and developing something in the longer term. So if you give an example in your CV of how you've developed something in the longer term and show how you've thought through a process of sustainability, we will love it. And another way would be showing your own commitment to volunteering. So it's a bit strange if you want to be a staff member for this huge volunteer network. If you've never volunteered yourself, it will be difficult for you to understand our world. So sometimes you need to think about how your own story is connecting with the organization in different ways, building on what Stephen says about knowing and understanding your story. Secondly, your strong skills fit for the specific role. So this could be being very clear about your transferable skills. So I really do think that people can bring skills from one thing they've done into another, whether that's maybe business into education, or whether it's, I don't know, marketing into education. Yeah, there are lots of different skills that are often transferable, or yeah, marketing into fundraising. There are just so many shifts that you can do where you can bring transferable skills. So you need to make that clear in how you explain your cover letter or CV, or also show your experience in similar roles and highlighting that to us. Say in your cover letter, I'm a great fit for this Ambassadors Network role because at university, I managed a club of 10 volunteers, and I was able to bring the team together to come up with a shared vision and then lead them towards our shared goals. And that shows us that you really have thought about the experience required and that you can relate it to what you've done. We're looking for commitment. So I think this is, again, an interesting thing to say, that I think for us, we often like people who have been in a role quite a while, especially for our more senior level positions. We're looking for someone who is able to commit to an organization over time, because we don't want to be recruiting every single year. So we don't necessarily want someone who does 1 year here, 6 months, 1 year, because we fear that you'll do the same with EduSpots. So you'll use us as like this stepping stone. And I think other organizations must think similarly. So showing your commitment to previous roles, and also committing to our application process through taking our tasks and so forth similarly. Ability to learn, receive feedback positively, and work independently. So in EduSpots, for example, we all work remotely and online most of the time. So we look for that ability to work independently in different ways, which I think can be reflected in your CV through the work you've done and also through your cover letter. And in terms of receiving feedback positively, it's something we do in interview is sometimes to challenge what the person has said or give feedback and see if the person is able to work with that feedback and improve what they're doing in different ways, rather than seeing it as a kind of a criticism or similar. And the final thing, which Steve, I can't remember what Stephen called it, but I've called it the X factor, is that often when you're looking through so many applications, you can't even describe what you're looking for. You're just looking for that thing that fits. That's something that stands out. It could be something creative, could be something a little bit quirky, something that speaks to this person's character where you think, oh, wow, this person's a bit interesting and I'd like to meet them. So don't be afraid to bring your character onto your CV. Maybe you have an outside career as a rap artist. I personally would love to hear this in an EduSpots CV. We really love when people have other hobbies and experiences that they bring in. So don't be thinking that you need to present yourself as a serious educationalist if you're applying for an education role as the only thing you do. We love hearing about, I don't know, a podcast you've got going, or maybe you're a fashion designer, all these things. There might be a way that it fits with what we're doing in EduSpots in different ways. Just checking the questions. Please, can you talk simply about how to write salary expectations when requested by an organization? I'm just thinking, yeah, I'll quickly go through this very quickly and then I'll come to more questions. And I think Stephen might also want to jump in at this point. So just a bit on like different organizational processes, as I think this is also helpful. This is just EduSpots's, but every organization will have their own. And it might be worth you asking them, what is the full process? So you really understand what you're entering into. So for EduSpots, it's just the first bit that is the CV and the cover letter. quite often we do look at your online presence. So as Stephen said, it is really helpful. It can be a real positive if we look at your online presence and we see that you're putting up good content on LinkedIn, you're supporting other organizations. We can get a sense of your character online, whether we think you're a good team player, whether you've got, energy and ideas, creativity. But if you're not an online person, that is fine. Not everyone needs to be a social media type, but it is something that might be of value for an organization. And also, if there's less professional things on your social media, then you need to be a bit wary of what's open and what employers can see. We assign a task to about 20% of applicants, as I see that as a very good differentiator between different people. So anyone who I think might be a good fit and want to give a chance, we assign a task to with a week-long period to do it. We then do a short 10 to 15-minute interview, which is usually more checking the kind of values, seeing their overall fit, which can often shortlist us quite quickly to a final round of a smaller number of candidates who, for some of our roles, we set in what's called an e-tray task, where we ask them to complete particular tasks over a 1 hour period to show their ability to respond over time, because we realize some people might have help with their tasks or their CVs and their cover letters, and we really want to see the reality of the person's working ability. And then we also ask for references and a police check, just as an overall example of how one organization works. Wow, I've been talking quite a lot. So I think I hope Stephen's still here to pick up some of these questions too, so that we can see how we can tackle these together. So Frida, do you want me to pick up the questions, or do you want to choose those?
Yes, so I can go through the questions, and I think Stephen will want to jump in for some questions, because I see Stephen wrote value proposition. I'm not sure which question he was responding to. Stephen?
Yeah, I have to warn that I'm in a car at the moment, so please forgive any background noise. Okay. I think, Kat mentioned the X factor, but value proposition, basically what sets you apart from other people, or something really unique that is the additional value that you bring that other people do not have. That was what I was responding to. Okay. But quickly on the next question, and then Kat comes in terms of salary expectation. I think you can take some steps. A lot of it is about researching the company before you go into it. And number one, you'll be able to find industry average. A website like Glassdoor is a good tool for assessing industry average website, but also people put up the salaries they were paying or they are receiving in their particular company. So a good thing for everyone is to search the organization you're applying for on Glassdoor to see if any of their previous or current employees have been kind enough to give an idea there. But other ways that you get to gauge that is to find out about any person who was in that role, look at their qualification and yours, and then that gives you the ability to gauge that against the industry average to say that this person was in the role, this is the industry average, but maybe I offer something more. More practically or technically, look out for the organization's financial statements, because there may be an organization in the same industry, it is the same role, but there's a significant difference in pay because of the amount of income that the organization gets. So if you can lay hand on their annual report, for example, use that to compare with the annual or financial report of your previous company to determine, okay, how much money does this organization get? What's their inflow and outflow like? And then you use that to kind of gauge. The key advice is not to give a specific figure to say, I want this amount, but give a window or a range to say that, okay, maybe somewhere between this and this. Being mindful that that range could determine the organization can simply go for the least. So it's also personally for you to decide that, okay, this is the least I will settle for. Okay, anything below 3,000 cedis is not okay. So that kind of make those decisions going into it. A huge factor that determines how much you are paid as salary is the work conditions. For example, being stationed in, say, Accra or being stationed in Seshiria, so it's different because in Accra your rent may be significantly different, or in Seshiria, so your rent may be lower. If it's a remote job, that may not apply because you are working from home anyway. But look out for all these factors. Do you have to take transportation? Does the company provide health insurance, and their professional development budget. So you're not looking at the benefit just as in how much your take home is, but the general benefit you get from this company. And the key advice I give to people as well is don't worry about the salary you're getting at the start of your career. At the start of your career, it's about building the experience, learning. If this is a credible organization you want to learn from, if it doesn't matter, working with a good organization that build your skills, especially at the grassroots level or a startup organization, it's an opportunity to grow your skills. And then once you have something like 5-7 years of experience, you begin to people begin to see your value, and you begin to see your salary rise steadily over the course of your career. Those are a few reflections, and I think Kat as a educator may have some insightful ideas as well.
Yeah, it's actually quite a difficult area, isn't it? Salaries. I think it's just to say, we're all learning in this process, and I think it's something that I've always found it a little difficult sometimes in an interview process. But I think ultimately you need to have an idea yourself of what you're looking for in your salary and in your role. If you really love the role, then you need to think about what level of salary you'd be happy. Like Stephen said, sort of knowing what your minimum salary is, but also you need to know your worth. If you feel that an organization might be taking advantage of you, then you really need to make sure that you do have confidence in asking for a higher salary. I think in terms of the question asks, how do you go about answering when an organization asks you what salary you want? I think, firstly, I'd say I think I'm aware that maybe some organizations act differently, and EduSpots always in different ways tries to be a very ethical employer that in different ways makes sure we try to make sure that people have a salary that reflects the value of their work, that they feel valued, and that we support in all the ways that we can. So I see the whole question. So I ask people at interview, what is the range of salary that they would be looking to take home? And I make it clear to them, this is not something they have to necessarily stick by, but it's mainly actually for us to have a good understanding between us. So sometimes I would see that question as, it's like it is like a negotiation ultimately, but it's also kind of you getting to know whether you're in the same kind of wavelength for the role. As I'm going to say that sometimes I think people misunderstand EduSpots, and I have people asking for extraordinary salaries to work in Ghana that's higher than anyone who's even a more senior fundraiser in an international context for doing a entry-level role. And I sometimes get a bit confused by that. And I think going back to what Stephen says, it's important for you to understand the type of organization you're working for. So in EduSpots, we're quite sensitive around staff salaries because we are a huge volunteer network of over 300 people working without any salary. So anyone coming into EduSpots needs to be aware that they're working in that context. So that's not to say if you think you have a real worth that you add to EduSpots that you should ask for, a salary that fits your worth. But it's important that you don't go in with a kind of, a really high salary that might be completely out of line with the organization's capabilities. As when people do that, I have actually just said, okay, I'm not interested in talking to you anymore, because as Stephen said, they have not understood the organization. If you look at EduSpots annual turnover, you'll get a sense. And I think there's some people who've wanted to be paid more than a fifth of our annual turnover, which when we're supporting 50 communities is not something we're going to be spending on one staff member's salary. And understanding something like I'm a CEO, but I'm unpaid currently, that kind of thing will reflect upon what you might be able to be paid as a staff member. But as Stephen says, if you then go into an organization that you love and you feel close values alignment with, you will see that your salary will increase quite quickly if you really add value to that organization. No one is going to want you to feel undervalued in your work. So yeah, that's an important thing to say. You might go in a slightly lower salary than you hoped, but then if you've gone in and you've proven your worth, 3 months later, you might feel confident in saying, look, I think I'm excelling in my role. I'm meeting all the objectives you've sent. I think can we talk about a salary rise? And I think that's great to go in when you have that background. So in answer to the question, be honest, have a good idea of your range, and make sure you don't then come back. If you've given a range, don't then come back later and say, actually, I want double, because that will be a bit annoying, because it might have meant that we've let other people go in the recruitment process. So sometimes as well, important to say, if you say ask for, I don't know, 6,000 cities a month for a role that's maybe more an entry-level position, it might mean that you're taken out of the recruitment process, because it might just mean that we think you're not appropriate for the level of role we're looking for. Similarly, yeah, it might happen the other way around in different ways. So just be a little bit cautious in how you handle it. And if in any doubt, just be open and honest, and then you won't go wrong.
So Adu asked, do you need to always update your CV considering the new position or role? Because sometimes you only update your CV when you're looking for a new role. And so that's what Adu is asking. But Stephen responded. Stephen said, as you should update as often as you get new experiences that add value to your CV. Stephen personally reviews his CV, his stock CV every 3 months and keeps a note of his growth and learning. So you need to treat your CV as a live document. Very interesting.
It might depend on how often you're applying for jobs as well. That maybe some of you are working for an organization where you're quite settled, in which case you don't need to constantly, it might be a good exercise. I can think it's a good reflection exercise, and it might enable you to see your growth in the process if you do it every 3 months. But yeah, it might depend on whether you're shifting roles all the time, applying for different types of roles. But yeah, I follow Stephen's advice. 3 months is probably good. I'm just thinking of myself in that when I was a teacher, I think I didn't update my CV for like 3 years, and then I had a lot of catch up to do. Yeah. Any other questions?
Do we have any other questions so we can round up? It's past time. If you want to raise your hand, it's fine.
I think just maybe a final reflection, if there's time, is also just never to give up. There are people in the EduSpots staff team who maybe applied 3 or 4 times before they got a job, and then they went into the job and they were absolutely fantastic. So sometimes these things, the world sometimes just takes a bit of time to align. So if there is an organization that you'd love to work for, or a type of job you'd love, just keep going. Just like in all types of life and social entrepreneurship or fundraising or grant applications, it can be a bit of a game of persistence. And it might mean you just never know who you were up against in a particular role, who might have been a good fit for the organization at that time. It might not be a reflection on you as an individual. There's nothing wrong with you. It might just mean that there was something else